Good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Patterson with EPM Live, and welcome to our webinar this morning entitled Resource Management in SharePoint using EPM Live's WorkEngine. WorkEngine is a multifaceted project portfolio and overall work management solution that's leveraged in a SharePoint environment. But we're going to focus specifically on the resource management aspects of that today. Just so you know, we're going to present some concepts in resource management and discuss those and how they're applied within our WorkEngine solution. There is a Q&A pane in your GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar control panel. If you ask questions, I have someone on board, Heather Champeau, who will be willing to answer your questions during the course of the webinar. Given the time constraints and also the number of people we're anticipating here, we're not going to open it up for verbal Q&A. So with that, let's get started. You know, from a resource management concept perspective, what we're really focusing on is the definition of resource management as the efficient and effective deployment for an organization's resources when they are needed, getting the right resources on the right work at the right time. Generally, resource types can be both human resources and material and other types of resources, but we're going to focus on the concept of human and labor resources today. The overall human resource management process has 5 distinct processes: resource capacity, resource allocation, resource work management, resource collaboration, and resource task management. We're going to touch on each of those areas conceptually and actually how they apply within EPM Live's WorkEngine solution. If you look at resource management lifecycle from the top down, you really start from broader, more high-level resourcing down to more specific and finite allocations and uses of resources and tracking of resources. At the top, when you think about initially doing resource capacity, that's very high-level planning just to get a sanity check and visibility into whether or not the staffing levels or the resources we have at our disposal are enough to take on the commitments that we're doing, or when we're looking at new commitments, do we have enough resources to fulfill our obligations. From that resource capacity, eventually you're going to allocate specific resources to projects and other work initiatives, named individuals who specifically have to do that work. Then from a resource work management perspective, you're eventually going to assign those people to specific work items or tasks or elements of work that you're going to be managing across the organization. Then those resources actually have to execute. Having resource collaboration tools and a tool that allows resources to collaborate with one another will allow them to actually effectively work together in the concept of resource management. From a resource task management perspective, once resources get things allocated to them and work allocated to them, they must effectively be able to participate, see what's on their plate, know what's expected of them, and actually provide timely feedback and statusing and completion status of those tasks. So all of these aspects of the tool set must be effectively addressed in a solution that's going to perform resource management for you. Because the truth of the matter is that really work is everywhere within your organization. Oftentimes we focus on the project work, things like project tasks in your schedules or your Gantt charts that you actually assign people to. But even on a project itself, there are lower level to-dos and action items, issues that need to be addressed, change requests that must be explored and executed on. And even if folks are doing things like more iterative methodologies like Agile, Scrum, for application management or product development, those backlog items, defects and features and user stories all need to be assigned to folks eventually and actually executed to successful completion. Even operational work like recurring maintenance and tickets and those types of things could be considered part of the total workload. With WorkEngine, your definition of how broad or narrow a definition of work you want to take is up to you, but the tools are provided in WorkEngine to accommodate all of these for a complete resource management picture. Today in most organizations, different types of work and different work assignments and different resource allocations are handled maybe in different departments, in different disparate systems, and with totally separate processes. So for example, operational service work, application development work, or even project management work could all be in separate applications and separate databases and have their own different workflows. The concept of being able to bring those things all together would create a lot of value for organizations if we can do that successfully. So here we introduce WorkEngine for SharePoint. The reason we say that is fundamentally the platform that we use as a collaborative platform for people to execute in is SharePoint, either SharePoint 2007 or SharePoint 2010. Any tier of SharePoint is fine, whether you're in the free version, WSS or Foundation, whether you're in the standard server version of SharePoint or the enterprise version, the Cadillac version of SharePoint. We support the tools we're going to show you here at any tier of that SharePoint platform. The work features, all different types of work that I described in the prior slide, we have templates for all those. So anything that's actionable and assignable to your resources, we can actually accommodate those within the system, and we have actually templates for all these different work types that you can use right out of the box. They're also, because of the ease of SharePoint configuration and modification, also easily modifiable to add different columns and values and other things that you might want to have in these work items. Very templated out of the box with WorkEngine. We actually bundle these things into different applications. So to do traditional project and portfolio management and get all your project work in there, we have an application set that actually provides best practices and methods for that type of work. We had mentioned Agile, Scrum, or iterative type of methodologies for product and software development. We have tools to use that methodology as well, and the work that's associated and the resource allocations associated with that. And then more operational work like service management can also be accommodated as well. Each of these applications is really designed so that it can be deployed standalone, but if you really want to get the total value of overall work management and resource management, WorkEngine actually acts as an umbrella so that you can do all of those and integrate them so you get total visibility and interaction with full portfolios of your work and initiatives. And from today's perspective, we're going to focus on how we can manage resources across all of that work. So no matter what types of work you're managing within WorkEngine within a SharePoint environment, whether they be projects and project workspaces you have set up and templated for the types of projects that you'd be managing, or more agile work or more service management work, WorkEngine is really providing the glue or the umbrella that ties it all together as a solution rather than a loose collection of individual workspaces where people have to go to manage their work individually. We provide components and features that actually roll up all of that work in the resources associated with those up to summary levels where you can get total visibility across all of them. Look at things like capacity versus demand. Look at total resource commitments. Look at project status, plan versus actual. Those types of things are available automatedly through WorkEngine in the SharePoint environment. So from an enriched feature set, WorkEngine is more than just resource management. Full featured project, portfolio, and work management solution. And all of these things are available to us, but today we're really going to focus on the resource management components of that. So let's start from that top down, looking at resource capacity, that high-level capacity planning. If you look at some standards of what the definitions are of resource capacity, it's really oftentimes identifying the generic roles or types of resources that you actually want to deploy against a project or a work effort. Then determining the estimated usage for each of those roles on those projects and identifying potential constraints. And then analyzing and adjusting your resource plan so it fits within your ability to deliver those resources. Ultimately, after reconciliation, you finalize a plan for that resource allocation across all of your work efforts. And that's built up from individual resource capacity plans for each of your projects or work initiatives. So from our perspective in WorkEngine, a resource capacity plan starts in WorkEngine in your SharePoint environment. For those using 2010 SharePoint, you see the familiar ribbon, and we add some additional tools and capabilities that we can launch from within that WorkEngine solution. One of them is Edit Resource Plan. For any portfolio item or work item within the solution, you can actually launch a resource or capacity planning tool that allows you to do just what we were describing. Identify the high-level roles or types of resources that you want, be able to plan on a time phase basis, whether it be in full-time equivalents or hours, what the resource requirement is, what level of effort you're going to require from those resources from a capacity perspective. Is it half an FTE per month? Is it 80 hours per month? Whatever your planning mechanism is, you have those, with also common visibility into what the remaining availability is for those resource types as you go on through. So the idea, much like you would do in a spreadsheet, but part of the overall solution, you would actually provide these time-phased resource capacity plans. Once you do resource planning for all of your projects and work initiatives, you can get good analytics and what-if capability through our modeler capability. In that, you can look at all of the efforts and portfolio items that are being planned, and then look by cost categories or by resources or by resource types what the requirements are in terms of hours and FTEs, and see whether or not they actually fit within your capacity to do that. Looking down at a heat map down below, seeing where you're over or under allocated or where you're approaching trouble. And the idea being is you can select and deselect projects. You can move projects along the time continuum to see if we stage them differently, can we do all these things. And also justify where you might need to hire or contract additional resources. And then by putting these resource capacity plans on an individual basis, on a project-by-project basis, and a resource-by-resource basis, we can start running reports and views that give us a total picture and slice this thing a number of different ways. In this one example, looking at a department and seeing if we're over or under capacity for the department. And then in the individual disciplines, for example, within that department, do we have the capacity within those individual resource types or disciplines? So next step would be resource allocation. In the resource allocation, what you're really doing is you're looking at those generic roles and matching potential candidates that have the right skills and availability so that you can actually put names to specific projects or work items. And the idea there is you're really transitioning from a generic resource type to more of a named resource, a specific individual who will actually execute on the work. You then would confirm the project or work assignment and duration. You can then verify the resource assignment with necessary parties, for example, a project manager requesting a resource and then verifying with the functional manager that owns that resource. That resource is actually available and can be allocated to that project or effort. And then really manage future shifts in resource assignments on an ongoing. As work shifts around, sometimes the time phasing and things and over-allocations may occur just by the nature of work shifting, so it's something that you would monitor and maintain over time. So in this case, in a resource allocation mode, you would just do something similar to what we talked about in the generic resource capacity planning, but really identify specific candidates who can actually perform those roles on these projects. Also, always having an eye, as you can see in the lower half of this picture, whether or not there's any remaining availability or if there's an existing over-allocation of that resource to see if there's bandwidth within individual resources to actually fulfill that role on yet another project or another initiative. Also, from a resource allocation perspective, when you start getting to named individuals, you're probably looking at moving towards, at least in this stage or maybe the next, to building detailed schedules and actually assigning individual resources to those detailed tasks items. So, for example, you would actually have the ability to build a team for an individual project first and foremost by identifying those candidates and making them your project team. And then from that project team, you can then actually assign resources to specific tasks in those projects and have individual allocations for those resources on specific tasks. So you can have 2, 3, 4 resources or more on an individual task with varying levels of effort. This is using our WorkEngine online work planner. It is a web-based product that allows you to do all the basics of building plans, schedules, and work breakdown structures, assign resources, dependencies, etc. Think of it as an alternative to using something like a Microsoft project, and if folks are not using it or are averse to using it in some way, this is a good alternative to do your project planning and resource allocation. We do also, just as an FYI, have a built-in bidirectional integration with Microsoft Project. Our Project Publisher component actually communicates between WorkEngine and SharePoint and Microsoft Project. So we can, for those of us that are using Microsoft Project and like using it for doing their planning, we can actually publish all the details, including resource allocations from Microsoft Project, out to WorkEngine and SharePoint, and then have the team members actually interact with that data out in WorkEngine in the SharePoint environment and have the updates actually presented to the project manager in Microsoft Project. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So from a resource work management perspective, as people then get assigned or allocated to projects, you then manage their work assignments, you track their performance on those work elements, you provide continuous feedback and status in a weekly cycle or more so that you can actually publish what's expected to your resources and have them give you feedback and status on what they've been accomplishing and what they've expended. Along the way, you would resolve issues and mitigate potential risks, and then respond to resource changes as most fluid environments are. Sometimes you have to substitute resources, sometimes you have to add more resource, and those types of things. It is an ongoing process from a resource work management perspective. We provide a lot of great tools in WorkEngine. For example, you can assign resources not just to tasks in your Microsoft Project Plan or your Gantt chart from our WorkEngine Work Planner, but you can also assign resources to almost any work item in SharePoint. So for example, if you're tracking issues, what if an issue is significant that somebody may have significant effort they have to apply towards? What if it takes them 2 or 3 days to resolve an issue and they have to dedicate their time to do that? You can assign a resource like you see here in the Assign To field with an atom bar, and our tools will allow you to check that resource to see if they're even available within that time frame, or are they already maxed out and allocated before you decide to officially confirm that that resource should be assigned to this issue. We'll show that in the demonstration as we go on through later on. The same thing would happen with Microsoft Project. Our Project Publisher, like I had mentioned, would allow you to build all of those details and all those tasks in Microsoft Project and publish them and have them not only viewable in SharePoint, but have them available for your team members to interact with that data and provide updates out in that collaborative SharePoint-based environment using our WorkEngine tools, and then have Publisher bring those updates back into Microsoft Project via the project manager's approval. It's a really nice closed-loop process, as we say, feedback, feed out and communicate to your team and then get feedback. Now, from a task basis, we showed how we can look at, over and under allocation and capacity versus demand from a high-level resource capacity perspective. But WorkEngine also provides some bottom-up views as you start doing all these tasks and issues and assignable work items at a very granular level. We can aggregate all those and provide you right in SharePoint views as to whether or not from a task basis and an assignment basis that you are over or under allocated at any given point in time. Our Resource Planner capability allows you not only to see this, but actually enact some what-if scenarios, so possibly you can move some work around or replace resource assignments on certain tasks so that you can resolve some of these over-allocations and get the work that's assigned actually done and completed. We also have a robust set of reports so that you can run at any time reports that give you visibility into capacity versus demand broken out by resources and by projects, and look at whether or not there are specific areas that where we're constrained that may put our projects or work efforts at risk. Now, once resource teams are put together and assigned to projects, resource collaboration is a big piece of this all. From a resource collaboration perspective, what we want to do is we want to define shared goals and objectives. We want to track status and real-time updates, but we also want to provide team-efficient tools to collaborate on all the things they have to do, collaborate on deliverables and documents and other aspects of the project so that we can communicate effectively. In this day and age when we have geographically dispersed teams globally, in a lot of cases, the ability to provide good tools for our resources to collaborate will prevent duplication of effort, for example, and really promote efficiencies in the way we execute on our work. So project workspaces are, and a number of templates are provided out of the box by WorkEngine, but these can all be modified to a customer's specific needs. Resources are just one aspect of it, but once you're assigned to a project, you may want to and need to collaborate on things like issues, risks, changes, discussion threads, action items, and documents, etc. The idea by being able to collaborate in this form, in this web-based form, and also be able to roll up that information from a reporting and a visibility perspective is a powerful set of tools. I think one of the values of us being in SharePoint is the fact that so many people are using SharePoint today, and it's a ever-growing and very fast-growing collaborative platform, is that folks are using it for content management. But we can now do work in there and manage our projects, and really, by using WorkEngine, get more value out of our existing investment in SharePoint. From a resource collaboration perspective, tasks that are either built within SharePoint and WorkEngine or in something like Microsoft Project can be readily viewed and updated right here within the WorkEngine environment. Also, for folks that are interested in capturing hours and actual time against projects, WorkEngine has a built-in time reporting or timesheet functionality so that you can report time on any work item, project or non-project, at any level of detail that makes sense for you as an organization, and not only capture your actual hours, but also capture physical progress against those tasks or elements and completion status. Very flexible timesheet, very configurable, any work item, any level of detail. Also, for folks that really incorporate the idea of more operational work, like tickets and service requests, those folks don't ordinarily want to jump in and out from their service ticket out to a timesheet to record their time. We actually provide tools that right within the work item, right within the task, right within the ticket, you can actually call up a work log so that you can actually report progress and the time against that right there in the item you're working on. It will, on the back end, really populate the timesheet, but not force you to have to go to the timesheet itself to actually meet your obligation or your responsibility to report that time. Also, we provide roll-ups of a lot of different things. We talked about possibly assigning an issue to a resource. Well, what if instead of having to go to individual SharePoint and WorkEngine project workspaces to find individual issues in individual workspaces, why not at a roll-up or summary level be able to go to one hub to look at all the open issues that you're involved in on a variety of projects, be able to access them and open them there, status them, and update them right from one place. WorkEngine really provides some powerful aggregation capabilities, so whether it's any work item, whether it's any group of resources, whether it be anything that's being managed at the detail level in the individual workspaces, we can provide visibility at a summary level so you don't have to go digging around and finding items in individual workspaces. Also, we're evolving with more and more Outlook integration. Currently today with our Outlook publisher, a resource can participate in the process from Outlook by, for example, taking an email and actually creating a service request or a ticket or a work item right in WorkEngine, right from their Outlook interface. Here, highlighted in red is the ability to create a new ticket, but then also take that that email and put a hyperlink right in the email so that you can actually access the work item that's actually created in SharePoint and WorkEngine at any given point in time to track its progress. And you can actually see that the email body that was the content of that work request is also automatically put into the work item that's generated in SharePoint and WorkEngine. So the idea is that you have really good, robust Outlook to SharePoint and WorkEngine integration. Then from a resource task management perspective, that's really where the plans are out there, we're really executing, and we're gathering all these work assignments, we're providing status and updates, and we're then monitoring overall health of all work and dependencies. To that end, we provide an aggregated My Work area, so an individual resource, no matter how many projects, no matter how many work initiatives, no matter how many different types of work that they're on, they can go to just one place to see what they've been assigned to see what's expected of them, and to provide that completion status and feedback they need. They don't have to go to a number of different systems or a number of different locations in SharePoint in order to do this. We provide one single place where they can provide and fulfill that requirement. There's also a combination of passive alerts like you see here, also supplemented by active alerts like email notifications. So resources can always have their finger on the pulse of what's expected of them, and also things that they've submitted and find out whether or not they're getting completed or not. The idea is this resource task management level is really important to executing and being aware of things that are changing on an ongoing basis. So with that, I'm going to leave the slide deck here, and I'm actually going to go into the solution itself. So here we are in WorkEngine. For those of you familiar with SharePoint 2010, of a familiar look and feel and navigation with the tabs at the top. And what we're doing is we're providing really aggregated information here. We talked about the idea of project workspaces, but this project center or portfolio that we have here gives a common central place where it actually crawls and rolls up all of that data from your workspaces, so that instead of maintaining a separate artifact or a list for this portfolio, this is really based upon real detailed information from your project workspaces. Now, that being said, how this applies to your resource management capabilities means that you could actually select any portfolio item, whether it be a proposed project or an active project, and leverage these tools that I've been talking about. So for example, I have a proposed project, which means we're probably very early in the planning cycle. And let's just say this office equipment and tracking system. If I select that and then go into our capacity planner, it will actually open up a tool that allows me to do that, more of that top-down capacity planning. So if you can see here, first of all, I have a number of different roles that were assigned here, and it was really simply a matter of going in and saying, adding a requirement. So if I go into add a requirement and I can select a role that I have defined within the system, I can just select that role and add that to the mix. Now, that being said, once we define what roles we're going to need on this project, we can go over and then determine on a time phase basis, either on an hours basis, on a full-time equivalent basis, in this case it's an FTE percentage basis, how we want to plan those resources over time. Let's just say I wanted to look at this in FTEs from a decimal format rather than a percentage. Or if I wanted to really plan this stuff in hours, I can actually I plan these in any which way that I want. From a capacity planning perspective, let's just say I'll leave it at the FTE percent. And you can see here that the project manager, I would need 25% of their time in August, September, and October. I'd need a full-time developer across those 3 months, etc. You get the idea. So I've added a business analyst. I put in their allocation at 25% on the first 2 months of the project. And the next thing that would happen after we do this, and we do this on each individual proposed projects or even our active projects, but at some point during your life cycle, these generic roles are going to have to become specific people if we're going to get the work done. So one of the things we can do is find candidates to actually fulfill these roles on the project. One way we can do that is we can actually find candidates to select from a number of different search mechanisms. For example, resources that are already part of the plan, we can actually just search for those. We can go and look for a certain department's resources. So let's say, for example, I just wanted to look at all the resources in the infrastructure department. I can then say, okay, and here's a bunch of resources that are made up of candidates here that I can go look and see their remaining availability and see how well it aligns with my needs up here. The idea being here is that you then create this list of candidates and can select from those candidates what it is that you'd like to use. I'm going to delete this selection. I'm going to do a new selection. I can also do candidates by who's already on the project team, or just do a general selection where I can look for people like Steve. Or I can just do a general selection and say, just show me all the resources that I can select from, and it would give me a full search of everybody I want to add to those candidates list. But let's just say I want to do something that's more specific. Let's say I'm looking at this business analyst role. And I go to select that business analyst role, and I want to look for candidates that are business analysts. I can actually ask it to match that. Oh, I'm sorry, I want a business analyst from the project office. And if I go to match that criteria, I am now seeing candidates that are either from the project office or in that business analyst role, and I get a percentage match based on how well they match the role and department, and also giving them points for how much availability they have and how well they're available. I can see 100% match means a good candidate would be this John Woods. And if I want to, I can look at his availability over those months that I need him. Also, I can select him if I want to and say I can add this candidate to be the resource on that particular plan. So what I'm doing now is allocating these to those roles on this project, and we can actually enable in this solution a full negotiation process where a project manager may make the request, a functional manager would be notified and actually make the actual resource assignment, and then notify the project manager when that is done. It's a very good way to enable that process, depending on how sophisticated your needs and how mature your process might be for allocating those resources. So that's how you can actually build high-level top-down capacity plans. Now, as we do this on a project-by-project basis, I can actually go in and do this on a more capacity planning. So I would be doing this on an individual project basis. But now, as I assign people from my different departments or teams or organizations to a variety of projects, what if I want to start focusing organizationally on just my department? I can actually go in here and say, let me see the resource plan just for the software development department. I can choose the time periods, whether it be fiscal months or timesheet periods, and the date range I want to see it for. Let me do this. I open up the resource capacity plan, and here I see an aggregation of all my resources in my department. I can see hours of allocation across those, and I can even look in and see a specific resource like Eric Anderson, who is on 3 projects within this time period. And down below, I can also see down below here in the totals that Eric Anderson is indeed over-allocated in a certain period of time down here. So as I look at the aggregation of all the capacity plans that were done across multiple projects, from a functional area, I can see that this total is, he's well over-allocated here, as well as Jill Schrader. So let's say, for example, I wanted to look at my entire department. Up above here, I could actually show a totals graph. And it shows me here that really, from an overall department perspective, I am well within my capacity lines, saying I have the staffing to accommodate all this work. But if I go to look at specific over-allocated resource like Eric, I can see a very good picture of his over-allocation graphically on what time periods he's over-allocated. And I believe Jill Schrader had a severe over-allocation period as well. What's nice about this is I start to look at this from a disciplines perspective. I could actually go up top, and one of my options might be to not show totals by individual resource, but just by category roles. Now I look down below here, and I can see that my department looks like I'm within capacity except for the areas of my developers and my DBAs. So for example, if I wanted to look at my overall department from this perspective, all looks pretty well. When I drill in and I start looking at my requirements for DBA work, looks like I have a constraint here in July. Or from a developer perspective, it looks like I have some significant constraints within multiple months within that realm. So the idea here is I can get good visibility into the aggregation of all these resource plans and slice it in a variety of different ways. Now, I can also go in here on an individual project, like I'll go into one of Eric's projects since he was over-allocated. And let's just say I wanted to go in here and now edit the resource plan for this project that he's on. As the functional manager, I can go into that plan and I can either modify Eric's allocation in this, or potentially find a candidate to replace him with or to share that load with him. The idea is I have good dynamic access to that information and the modifications of those to reconcile any problems that I have. Now, as we start building all of these different resource capacity plans, one of the things we might want to do is use our modeler. And our modeler is really our what-if capability. So let's just say we've got resource plans, capacity plans that are built for not just our proposed projects, but we have existing ones in place for our active projects. So let's just say I selected all the proposed projects and I selected all of the active projects. If I then go and select the modeler, it's really going to load up the information for all of those projects or proposed projects. And you can show fields of data here that are most applicable to you, like prioritization if you have that, and other things to help you select from these projects. But the idea here is that if I go and I can look at it from costs or FTEs or hours, in this case, let me go look at it from a full-time equivalent basis. And what this is telling me is if I go over here that if I want to do all the projects that were selected, these are the FTEs per month I'm going to need for these roles. I'm going to need 4.1 project managers in January. I'm going to need 6.6 business analysts in January. And on a time phase basis, it's aggregating all that out for me. Another great tool about this, though, is I can actually have capacity targets, meaning if I have a target that outlines my current FTEs or headcount or budgets, I can actually overlay that target onto this particular scenario. And I can see from a heat map perspective where I do not have the staffing currently available to meet these needs. So for example, you can see in the red here, I do not have enough business analysts to do this work from April on. I don't have enough project managers from July on. The idea being I can then justify here, if I was looking at it, all these things had to be done, additional staffing or contracting to fill those needs. Now what's nice about this tool set here is that I can actually do some manipulation and what-ifing. For example, what if I said, let me deselect the 5 or 6 lowest priority or lowest ranked projects. That now frees up some resources and looks like it defers my problem out until August. Now at this point, I could also look at potentially see what if I delayed certain projects and staged them out in different periods of time. Would that help me out here as far as being able to accommodate being able to do this work all in this year? So the idea between selection of projects and the staging and timing of projects, we can actually do some good informed what-if analysis to help us make decisions on the timing and whether or not we do certain projects. We can actually save and copy versions of these things so we can actually evaluate different scenarios and review them with the rest of our team and other folks that need to be involved in the decision. Another way we could do this is actually go into an individual project like this Xbox project and go into its work planner. So I can look at our online work planner for detailed task information. So for example, our online work planner for WorkEngine is providing us the ability to build tasks, to put in dates and durations, to assign resources, to build a work breakdown structure hierarchy, to put dependencies on our tasks, all the basics that you would find in a project planner, for example. One of the things that we can do is take the information we had regarding our project team that we already created when we did earlier capacity planning, and when we actually go to look in here, we can actually add resources by selecting or finding them from our team perspective and search for those based upon different parameters, whether or not there are most common resources, which we can have favorites, and do advanced searching parameter to find the resources that we want to add to our team. The idea here, though, is that once they are on our team, we can assign them to specific tasks. In this case, I can go into the resource assignment area and notice I assigned Adam Barr and Bob Kelly here. They each have 8 hours of work on that, but they don't have to have the same level of effort. I can actually have differing levels of effort by different resources on these particular tasks, meaning these specific work assignments are going to become part of the definitive workload and task allocation that Adam and Bob are going to have to respond to. Now, the same type of input into the system could be done with Microsoft Project using the Project Publisher, as we talked about earlier on. Our Project Publisher would also publish that data into this environment, and our system would actually leverage this information just the same as if we did it on our work planner. The other piece is that we can actually go in and assign resources not just to things in our project tasks or our project plans, but if we went into, say, an issues list, that issues list within this particular project, we have some issues here where we have resources actually assigned. Let me open this parts on back order issue. We have issue templates in here that allow you to put other information on here, like descriptions and categorizing them, associating them with other issues and tasks, comments and resolution, and even assigning work effort if it's a substantial issue. And since this one has work effort, I might want to actually assign it to somebody and check to see if they even have the bandwidth to do that. So, you know, SharePoint does a good job of creating lists, but the resource management aspects of it is something that a third party like us has to provide. So, for example, before I actually commit this, where Steve is going to work on this between these dates here, the start date and the due date, why don't I check to see if it's even possible for him to do that? And by doing so, I can use a WorkEngine tool called Check Resources. And it's going to go out and slot this piece of work and actually compare it to all the other work he has in place. So here's the new task on the top line. Here's a roll-up of all his tasks, and I'll show you that it's really based upon all the other work tasks that he has involved. And the idea being is it's aggregating those and actually calculating his workload. Let's just say, for example, well, this looks like he can actually do the work. It's below his capacity line. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that he was over-allocated in this period of time. I could actually take this piece of work and I could actually move it to slot it to a time frame where he did have time. And actually, I could say save the dates, and it would actually impact these dates down below here to give him work at the time that we want him to do it, based upon doing some sanity checks on his availability. So some good resource in-process tools, even when we're in an item and thinking about assigning a resource to that task. The other key is, whether it be issues, risks, change requests, any other type of work item, WorkEngine is always going to provide you the ability to look at it not only at a project-specific level down below here, but also give you the ability to look at it from a roll-up perspective. If I go up to the enterprise level and go to look at all issues, I can actually look at all issues or risks or tasks at a higher level. So now I'm looking across multiple projects without having to go into the individual workspaces to deal with those issues and the resources that are associated with them. So really what we're talking about right now is you can assign all kinds of work items. We've done the capacity planning. We've assigned people to detailed tasks and work items within this. And then to get visibility, we saw a partial view of that through an individual resource when we looked at the check resources functionality. But what if we want to just do some resource capacity allocation type of analysis? We have a resource center with a resource planner that would actually bring us to our centralized resource pool. We actually have a special centralized resource pool that we enable here within the SharePoint environment in WorkEngine. And from within there, you can check resource allocation or resource plan aggregation information for individual resources, or in this case here, I'll look at the entire infrastructure department. If I look at the infrastructure department and say view the resource plan, it is going to crawl all of the work and find all of the work items that are assigned to everybody on that team, and then render me visibility into what that means to me across my department. So from a department perspective, if I look at both the generic and the named individual resource assignments here, it looks like I have a period here in January and February where I have more work than I have people to do that for. If I want to look in specific and I want to see someone like Bob Kelly, I can see Bob has tasks and other work items down through this period. So here I can see Bob has some stuff that falls right within this period. If I took a piece of work, I can do this in a what-if mode here without impacting the overall committed plan and start exploring the ideas of what if I could backfill certain work? or more likely at times you're moving out work into different places. And the idea is we can look at that from a resource work perspective and look at whether or not we can find a time slot for Bob to do that work, or maybe we have to reassign it to someone else. And we can also do things here from a task level basis, just like we did with the capacity plan modeler. Let's just say I wanted to see this work by project instead of by resource. I can then group the same workload, but then look at it organized by project rather than by resource. And here's all the projects that are impacted. Notice the same resource constraint or over allocation here. From here I can start deciding maybe I need to just defer or not do certain projects by unchecking them, for example, and then diminish the resource requirement to a point where I can actually get it done. And this type of evaluation could then be evaluated with other people in the organization to see if it's something that we can all buy into, or perhaps it might be a matter of, like I said, deferring and moving work out in order to get all this work done in a time frame that makes sense. From a resource task management perspective, if I look at it from an individual resources perspective, we have a My Work area in this solution that allows people to look at all of their work in a central place. So the My Work area really would allow me, as Steve Masters, this person I'm logged into the system as, can see all of the work items I've been assigned to, whether they be tasks, issues, risks, operational tasks, what be it. And as I go through here, if I want to update a task, I can actually, even though it was created in a project planner, I can actually see it here. I could open it here via hyperlink, or I could simply update it. So for example, here I could actually update this to say it was, say, 100% complete. Save that update, and now my task is updated, and I've fulfilled my requirement to provide feedback and completion status to my project manager. That would be reflected in any of our SharePoint-based work items like an issue, and if it was created in Microsoft Project, for example, it would be presented to the Microsoft Project Plan owner as an update for them to review and accept into the plan electronically without them having to rekey that information. Also, you can look at this in a variety of ways. You can look at it by when they're due here. I'm looking at what's overdue, so I make those priorities for myself. Or let's just say I want to look at it by project, the same type of thing we did in the resource planner. So now as the resource, I can go in and look on a project-by-project basis and see what I have on each of these projects and be able to organize and categorize in those ways for myself. For those folks that are wanting to manage time via the My Timesheet and not just do task statusing, because some folks aren't interested in reporting time against their projects, they just want collaborative updating. But the timesheet gives you the best of both worlds. That timesheet will allow you to track time against work items at any level of detail and for whatever type of work you want, and also be able to update progress like % complete here in one screen. So for example, you can enter time, and you can even subdivide time into subcategories like billable, non-billable, capital or expense, regular overtime, whatever makes the most sense for you. Or you can turn this dialog off and actually optionally just have them fill that number right in the grid like you would in a spreadsheet. The idea being is that you can do all your time reporting, feedback actual expenditure against the plan right here within WorkEngine to facilitate the resource management process, and also get a better handle on what it's really taking us to get the work done as opposed to what we forecasted or planned that it would be done. We have other tools available in here, for example, where a resource could go into their personal planner and actually go in and actually start forecasting their time off. So if you want to block out and decrement their availability, a person can in advance go into the solution and pre-plan things like vacation, jury duty, family leave. I don't know how well we can plan sick time in advance, but who knows? Yeah, I guess it's possible. But the idea here is that we have the actuals and also the planning of time off that actually feeds both the planning and the actual perspective. Probably lastly, what we're looking at is the ability to do robust reporting. WorkEngine really leverages all of the things that SharePoint can provide in ways that we can surface and report on data. So if I go into our report center, that report center would give me a few things. In this report center template that we have, WorkEngine provides a charting web part that you can configure, much like you would configure an Excel chart, but really have it accessing dynamic data and rendering it as a dashboard in a web page. In essence here, I'm using the same web part 4 times, but I'm actually grabbing different data, formatting different chart types, and representing things like work by project type. Here I'm actually by type of project showing work versus actual work captured from the timesheets. Here against that from a resource management perspective, so I can look at how I'm spending a resource according to plan. Also, we provide a lot of out-of-the-box SQL Server reporting services reports. In this regard, from a resource management perspective, a good one here is resource work versus capacity. And here I can launch, open an SSRS viewer. I could say select the resources that I want to see in this report. Let me say I want to not just look at project tasks, but I want to look at all actionable work. And let's say I want to do this from the first of the year, and I'm going to do it over, say, a 2-month period for now. And I want to see it in weekly increments. If I go to run that report, once again, it's pulling from the data that we've captured with WorkEngine, and I can see within the group of resources that I selected, only 3 of them have work assigned, and it looks like that means I'm well within capacity for that group of selection. But I do see that here that Adam Barr has a week where it looks like he's over-allocated significantly for that week by 32 hours. In this report, I can easily drill down, and I can actually see what projects Adam Barr is actually on in that week, and it looks like on the strategic merger and acquisition project, he's actually over-allocated just on that project alone by 16 hours. And on top of that, we've layered on another 16 hours for this Exchange 2010 implementation. The idea, and also you can drill down into the specific task level you're in within that as well. So it's a very helpful report. And what's nice about the SSRS reports is that you can actually export them out to common formats like PDF, Excel, Word, etc., so that you can distribute and share or even archive these reports. We also provide very flexible ways to go into our reporting database and into the content data here and actually use dynamic data links to grab that data with Excel so that we can pull it into Excel and then manipulate that and chart it. And also we provide a lot of capabilities for dashboarding. If we're looking at resource work, a work dashboard might combine charting like we talked about with that charting web part and very discrete data and very definitive data regarding specific projects. So here we have work by actuals up top, but then on a project-by-project basis, looking at portfolio with work metrics in here, what we've planned, what's actual, what's remaining, what's been reported on the timesheet, what % complete we are, et cetera, all the way on through, with the ability to drill into the specific project if it made sense to do so, if we were interested. So with that, I'm going to go back to our slide deck. And so what we've really gone through is the different tiers and different levels of resource management. We talked about resource capacity planning, going through and doing resource allocations and putting named individuals onto those projects. Resource work management, really getting people assigned to specific work elements within the solution. Resource collaboration tools and ways that resources can work with each other on things like common issues and those types of things in our project workspaces in SharePoint. And then resource task management, where the resources can get all of their tasks in one place and provide updates and status. Really end-to-end, from the top down to the more high resource capacity planning to the very granular task management and execution that we need to do to get our projects completed successfully. Just a reminder, it is very powerful that we're based on SharePoint so that folks can leverage SharePoint, their knowledge of it, and keep their learning curve to a minimum. But we do offer this as an online solution, meaning you can get an online environment with us and pretty much start with our templated solution from day one. There is the ability to tailor the solution and make modifications to make it specific to you, like your nomenclature and all those types of things. But the idea, if you're not using SharePoint today, or maybe you're using an older version of SharePoint, want to get the latest and greatest, you can start online with us today. And what's nice about it, you can choose to either deploy it in-house as a licensed solution or move an online solution and pick it up and move it into your internal SharePoint environment at any time. So you have a lot of options on how you would actually avail yourself of the solution and get the benefits of it, but then deploy it in a way that makes the most sense for your organization, both from a platform perspective, a budget perspective, etc. That being said, you can check us out at WorkEngine.com. If you go to our website, you can view recordings of demos like this one. This one will be up there shortly. You can view prior webinars with more targeted things in other areas of our solution. And you can actually click on the Try Now button if you want to request a trial environment online so that you can actually get your hands on this and get a feel for how it might fit for your organization. Now, as a special promotion for the attendees here on this webinar, the Project Publisher, which is the component that adds into Microsoft Project, either 2007 or 2010, and it'll work in Standard or Professional. You can actually download a free copy, a fully licensed copy of Project Publisher at no charge, a $50 value. That if you use the discount code PROJPRO, like you see here, go to that URL. You can actually download a free copy of Project Publisher and add it into Microsoft Project, and you can actually publish your Microsoft Project details out to any SharePoint site, even without WorkEngine there, because it is just a component. It creates lists in SharePoint, but then allows you to update it in SharePoint and get all those details back into Microsoft Project. So we'd love it if you take advantage of this offer and get a fully licensed copy of Project Publisher for just attending this. With that, I would like to thank you. If you do have any questions, you can reach me, and I guess I probably should have put my contact information in there. And I'm going to just put a text box in here real quick. My name is Jim Patterson, and I can be reached at jpatterson@epmlive.com. Or if you have a general question, you can go to sales@epmlive.com. And with that, I would just like to thank you all for joining us today, and hope you have a great day. And as I said, if you have any questions at all that haven't been answered through the Q&A pane by Heather, and you want to contact us directly, happy to entertain any questions that might be specific to you. I hope you enjoyed the webinar today, and hope you found the information valuable, and we hope to talk to you later on. Thank you very much.